Hi everyone, Bob Massey here, and I just want to give you an update on a situation that occurred to me recently in a short sale and think you ought to be aware of and know how to handle this if it happens to you. I got an approval letter recently from Bank of America. It was on a countrywide loan, and kind of buried into the approval letter, the 10th bullet in, was a line that says there are to be no transfers of property within 30 days of the closing of this transaction. So in other words, they wanted to avoid me having the ability to flip the property. So fortunately, I had a phone call with my attorney, and I knew that in cases where an objection had been brought up because the title insurance company would not handle that exception on a title insurance, that they've been able to get around it. So I talked to the attorney, and lo and behold, the timing was perfect. He'd gotten a bulletin from his company, which is First American Title, and in that there are a couple things that are covered that I think you should be aware of. And they will help you when a clause like this shows up from, specifically it's been Bank of America on that particular clause. But let me give you an idea what it is. There's actually two things. There's that are covered in this bulletin from First American Title Insurance. One is the right to void a transaction and reimpose security instrument after closing. In other words, there can be a clause in the approval letter that says if it is determined that sellers and or buyers participated in any way to the fraud, this short sale will be void and the note and security instrument will remain in full force and effect. The title insurance company says to the attorney in this case, or to the escrow agent, that they are not authorized to approve that transaction and to issue title insurance on that transaction unless it is amended, unless that language is specifically taken out. The second thing is notification of subsequent transfers. That's the line that I read you that affected me on my particular transaction. And the mortgage or the title insurance company had exactly the same response to it, and that is that they cannot approve such a transaction. And the specific reading that they had was there to be no transfers of property within 30 days of the closing of this transaction. Escrow instructions must contain a clause that if such a transaction takes place, then the title/escrow company must notify the lender. Well, here's what the mortgage company, or title insurance company, had to say about that. We are not in a position to continue to monitor the actions of the buyer after the closing of the transaction, and you are not authorized to close the transaction unless the letter is amended in writing to remove the requirement. Okay? Very, very important. It has to be removed. And so this is an easy fight back to your approval letter to say my title insurance company will not approve that. I cannot get title insurance to buy the property without that clause being removed. In addition to that, now here's a clause that your own attorney or your escrow agent or closing agent will get onto very carefully, and it talks about disclosure must be made, and here specifically, if at or before closing you are aware of any transaction scheduled to record concurrently with or after the short sale transaction, disclosure must be made to the short sale lender and any lenders funding the purchase to close. Okay? So the important thing, we've been talking for a long time about the clauses that you have in your contract and making sure that you have yourself covered, that you are disclosing clearly to the seller, to the seller's mortgage company who's doing the short sale, and that you disclose to the buyer that it's a short sale and to the buyer's mortgage company. So these things are just reinforcing what we've been saying before. You need to make sure that you are operating as openly as possible and as transparently as possible with very clear wording. If you go to theagentmagnet.com and our member site, we have very specific language in there that you can find to use to make sure that you have yourself covered and don't end up with these issues at closing. So I guess there's two main lessons here. Number one is make sure you disclose. And number two is make sure that you get a copy of the approval letter, and not all negotiators want to give up a copy of that approval letter, but make sure that you get it so that you can review it and make sure that you don't get to closing and all of a sudden find that there was one of these clauses in there that will keep you from closing. So that's it. Make sure you keep yourself clean and legal and fully transparent in your transaction. Good luck.